Hello, good morning, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and Disembodied Hands, Quindy, Justin, and John. How is everybody? Happy Thursday. It's almost the weekend. Hey. Hi. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Here we are. We have Bunny. Yay, Bunny. And today we need to finish up Bunny's fur. And we need to give her a shirt. I'm carefully just going to avoid all those puns. You guys can have fun all stream. That's fine. Alrighty. Oh, geez. I should have put lotion on my hands. Okay, 1 second. 1 second. Have to do something. Have to do this. Have to deal with it. Sorry, folks. Get dry skin so bad. It's cold and dry here. I don't like cold and dry. I do not approve of cold and dry. All right. So we were using rich leather and blonde hair. And I wanted to use, you guys voted on violet red. So I need to dig out my violet red and decide what flavor of violet red is going to go with this lady. Yeah, cold and wet is actually, I don't know, sometimes I prefer it because it's the same reason like my mom, they go to Arizona for the winter, my parents. And she has the same dry skin problem I do. Like, I totally got it from her. And she just, yeah, the weather's lovely, but she almost would prefer wet just because. I think my best climate is actually Hawaii, where it's raining a lot and it's really humid and it's warm. Like, seriously, I've warned David, if anything happens to him, I'm packing up and moving to Hawaii. So he's got to not run into a tree on his ski trip. Or I get a permanent tropical vacation. He did manage to make it to his ski destination. So, or at least he made it to Canada. So now he's on a bus for 4 hours. Oh, it's not better, it's different, Lady Kachara. So, okay. So since you just ordered a porcelain palette, let us talk about the differences here. So in order for your porcelain palette to work really, really well for you, hold on, I'm crooked. No! All right, there. So in order for your porcelain palette to work well for you, you need to use several drops of paint, and you do need to add water in each of these little wells, because the more goo, the more paint and water you have in each well, the longer it's going to keep your paint wet for longer, essentially. And since you're used to a wet palette, you're used to your paint staying wet a long time. So I would use at least like four or 6 drops of paint. If you're using 4 drops of paint, add at least 2 drops of water. Except for base coating. Base coating, you can do like a 4 or 5 to 1. So for like 4 or 5 drops of paint, 1 drop of water if you want. But this is like important because people who get frustrated with well palettes usually are just not adding enough paint, or they're not using a small well palette like this one where the well is barely bigger than my finger. And so if you use too big of a porcelain palette, then it's going to essentially it just gives a lot of surface area and the paint just dries unless you make a super big, deep puddle. So keep that in mind. And now the strength in exchange for having to do that, the strength of the well palette is that it does let you use ratios effectively. So you can mix up a 3 to 1, a 4 to 1, a 2 to 1, a 1 to 1, and have your paint stay at that consistency for longer, which is why I usually recommend trying both. Because this will let you kind of dial in and internalize the consistency of your paint faster. You're going to understand more, like, because you can keep your paint where you want it, you're going to get a longer time of experiencing how to work with your paint at various stages. And this is really valuable because that's like, once you get a feel for that, you don't need ratios anymore. You're just going to mix the paint and kind of know what your paint has to be, what kind of like, what it's going to have to look like and feel like. And this will help you then if you go back to the wet palette, because although you have to relearn a little bit of your wet palette technique, you're going to understand how thick or thin you want your paint for each like technique you're doing, which helps you when you're trying to kind of mix on the fly. So that's why both palettes are of benefit. Like learning to use both, I just feel like if you're starting out painting and you're trying to understand paint consistency, you're going to have a faster learning curve using the well, and then trying to transition back after you have a good feel for paint, for what paint you need, what consistency you need for each technique. Does that make sense? Yeah, the strength of this is that it will allow you to understand paint consistency hypothetically faster. So like if you're always mixing to a 2-to-1 to do your layering and then you switch to a 1-to-1, you're going to be able to see the difference, understand the difference, feel the difference. And that will help you when if you go back to a wet palette, because then you're like, oh, I need around a 1-to-1 and it kind of looks and feels like this. So I'm going to mix it and do it, So stuff like that. It's like that. This will help you overall understand paint consistency. That's the goal. All right. Less talking, more bunny. And I do want to mix up. Man, I'm going through rich leather like nobody's business lately. This might be my new color that I run out of all the time. Because I'm always doing 4 drops to start. Yeah, so yeah, using both. I think that the best painters in the world use both a little bit. Lady Kachara. I mean, a lot of really, really good painters only use the wet palette because they've just gotten so good with it. But that takes time and experience to get that good with it. And I feel like you can shortcut that a little bit by using a well, understanding what your paint should look like for techniques, and then going back to the wet. Now, mileage may vary. Everybody is different, of course. So, try it, give it a shot, see what you think. I'm going to put 1 drop of blonde in there, 2 drops of blonde here. Yeah, it's and also the paint line that you're using. Like I may actually go to the wet palette a little bit for when I'm using my tube paint, because with a thick bodied paint like this, it makes sense that maybe I would want to do that. So, you go back and forth. Like you're painting life, you're going to go back and forth between palettes and different types of wet palette, and you're going to experiment, and that's good. That's how you like kind of create your organic like way to paint. And that's the fun, like that's one of the big funs, in my opinion, the big funs of mini painting, is that really at the end, as you get better and your minis start to look like just like your minis, like you painted them, it's like you developing like kind of what works for you leads to your miniatures looking a certain way. And eventually, if you keep painting, that turns into your style. And so that's really cool and exciting and organic, and it'll just, shift and change and zoom around. And then one day you'll walk back and look at a bunch of your minis. You'll be like, whoa, they all look alike somehow. And that's when you'll know you'll have developed a style as a painter. And that style will change throughout your painting career as well. So it's all an evolution. It's just super exciting. It's just super fun. Even if you never thought you'd be an artist, if you don't think you have a single artistic bone in your body, if you keep painting miniatures and getting better and better and better, eventually you will. You'll develop an artist style. It just shows that everybody has a little artist in them. Alrighty. Anyway, off of my favorite, because I love mini painting style. I love talking about different styles and different painters and how style evolves and all this kind of stuff. That's like kind of one of my nerd things. So sorry, Anne's nerd thing struck again. Other people have other nerd things like spreadsheets. I do not nerd out over spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are a necessary evil. However, I nerd out over painting styles and analyzing them and trying to figure out why they work and why they are and what their particulars are. Let's see, where's my black and brown was our first shadow. For now, Cornico, for now. Although if you are right, you do make a good point, despite the fact that you are joking. You do make a point in that if you don't try to improve, if you just like get to a point where you're just happy and you just do it, then yeah, probably you won't develop a style. Not really. Like your stuff probably will still get to looking alike, because even when you're not trying, there is a certain level you'll get to because you'll just get better at that. So even if you're just like washing, like doing a wash and then doing a highlight, chances are, as you do it, you'll just get better at it. And so you will still kind of develop kind of a look to your miniatures. And where you want to take that is up to you. Sometimes I think that intermediate painters like think that they won't ever or can't develop a style, or why would they want to develop a style? But it's just the reason it excites me and it makes me happy is that it's an expression of your individuality. Like, your style is an expression of you. It's an expression of what colors you like, what techniques you like to use, what models you enjoy painting, what scale you like working at. All of that is like an expression of your style. So your style is like your individuality expressing itself through your mini painting. And that's like the best like description of it that I can think of. And it's why I get so excited about it and happy about it, is because it's like an expression of why you love painting. Just do it a little bit at a time. Don't push yourself too hard, Kerniko. But yeah, start, reach a little bit. If you're enjoying where you are, then enjoy it. Try throwing in a curveball and seeing how you adjust. But I know you're getting over a big, nasty thing. So don't hold yourself like accountable. Like, do it because it's fun. Don't do it because you feel like you should. Should is just not a word that needs to fall into miniature painting. Do it if you feel it. Like, if you enjoyed like working at a higher level, then try to reach for a little bit of that again, but don't hold yourself up to expectations or anything. Expectations are silly things. Just like Camelot. Let's not go there. All right, so we're making pretty colors to finish up our bunny's fur. That's rich leather with some black and brown in it, rich leather with some blonde hair in it. And then a more blonde hair than rich leather to bring up a highlight. So essentially I'm making a custom triad based off of rich leather. And this is something you can do with any medium tone paint. So anything that's kind of in the middle, you can choose a color and mix it in as a shadow. You can choose a color and mix it in as a highlight. And then you can even turn that into a custom pentad by taking, like, in this case, I've got rich leather plus black and brown or plus blonde hair. So I could take black and brown as my ultimate shadow and blonde hair as my ultimate highlight. And I've got a pentad at that point. And I've done it custom. And you could do this with any color in Master Series, really, unless it's really, really light or really, really dark. Then you probably have to start at the one end and work one way or the other. Hello, Eric Jackson. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because doing models that you wouldn't normally have done also allows you to play with techniques that you might not otherwise have experimented with, right? All right, I am going to get some straight up blonde hair mixed up. So we are kind of going in the direction of a pentad at that point. Because I want this really light highlight on the fur, and then we'll get in close and we'll do our fur. And I may actually mix a little bit of this with bleached linen as well, which I believe I did for the top one. So I'm going to actually transfer. And when I get to the point of mixing highlights, I'm almost always grabbing from the previous thing and moving it to a new thing, and then just adding a little bit of off-white. Because that's going to guarantee that your highlight here works well with this color. Yeah, comic book style can be carried to quite a high level. It's actually one of my personal ambitions this year to really, really go hardcore on a comic book style bust. I've got 2 picked out, a science fiction one and a fantasy one. And I've been, because I'm Anne and I take it to extremes, I've been studying comic book inking techniques because I think that's appropriate. Although, that's another thing, which style is very interesting. Like, every comic book inker has, although now it's a lot of digital, right? But when they did it with brushwork, everybody had a very unique style. And it's fascinating to, look at it. I feel like actually the other way around might be more beneficial, Valandar. Maybe? I don't know. I mean, comic book style does involve NMM, you're right. So, like, you know, when you see a metal depicted in comic book, it definitely is using NMM. But at the same time, I feel like comic book style does make you study shadow placement pretty intensively. And so maybe it would, like, if you feel like you're, like, grounding out on NMM, it might be cool to kind of study comic book for a while. It might help you have a breakthrough if you have trouble with your NMM. Just a thought of mine. All right, so we were doing some, let's get in focus. 1 second. There we go. Bunny in focus. So we were doing little brush strokes on the fur here. Little texture fur marks. The cool thing about comic book style is, like, I feel that there's only a couple of people who have really, like, kind of knocked it out of the park. So I feel like it's a style that could still be carried to a higher level in our hobby. And that is exciting for me always. I like to, like, experiment with stuff. Certainly looks pretty cool. All right, so I'm just bringing in a little bit more fur texture here. On the front of the leg where the highlights are coming down. I'm going to paint the toes, all this mid-tone color, this blonde hair plus rich leather. I'm going to just paint them quite solidly because the feet were lighter colored on our bunny. And so we're going to just bring them up. Lighter colored here. I'm gonna bring in those little fur brush strokes leading right into the toes, and then we will bring up the color. Comic book style uses, like, black shadows, black lining, patterning, and kind of cell shaded, but it really depends on, like, the point. I can't even describe it. Like, probably if you pick up any modern comic book, you're going to get extreme darks that go into black. And you're going to see some type of cross-hatching or line work that's depicting shadow. And then when you hit mid-tone and higher, it's more blended. The Borderlands art style from Borderlands 2 or 3 is a good example of kind of a type. It's a very individualistic type, but it's a type of comic book style. Yes, you've got to. I think that's the right way, or not the right way, but it's a great way to tackle it. It's how I'm tackling it, Valandar, is to study comic book inking, different styles of it, different, and I think that will help inform the process a lot. I think that's a great way to do it. So just bringing up the light on the feet here. I'm going to probably also glaze. I'm going to bring up a little bit of this light fur. And I'll also glaze the foot to bring it up. And probably also I want to get rid of some of the very dark lines between the toes. So I'm going to grab a lighter color and build a glaze. So let's pop that over here. I'm going to use this color, which is one off of my top highlights. So this is mostly blonde hair. Light glazing is fraught with peril. You have to move fast. You don't want to you really risk leaving brush marks when you glaze light, and you have to thin your paint down immensely. So be cautious, do a small area, go fast. Eric Jackson, I just said Borderlands. We both thinking the same thing. But yeah, I studied the Borderlands too. I've got the Borderlands 3 art book. Although some of those, it can be hard to find the examples of the style on some of the concepts, but it gives you an idea what they're going for. You can also just play the freaking game. Load up the game and look at any landscape or any character. So I'm puddling that glaze on, so I have time. Squeezing out my brush. I'm going to come in and wick off just at the edges Gonna take off that excess fluid. If you have to, you can use the very tip of your brush to kind of wick off the fluid from top areas. I might, if I have to get a handle on it. I don't teach anything until I feel like I can really explain it well, Agent Marvel. This is why it's a style I want to try out. And but in order to teach it, I feel I do need to have a really good grasp of it, which means painting a couple of models in it and like really nailing it. Although I tend to believe also, and it varies, but I tend to believe that some models are better for comic book style than others. So I'd have to find a model also that I felt in the Reaper range was a good fit for it. I'd be more likely to do kind of a set of things on the Patreon, probably. Because I feel like there's enough moving parts with comic book style that it might be difficult to explain cohesively in a stream. In some ways it's super simple, and in some ways it's not. Like many things. And once I actually paint it, maybe I'll find that it's more or less complex than I think. Just gonna bring in a little bit of extra light fur on the feet. Oh, why do we get out of, there we are. We're back in focus. So just bringing up that feet, still bringing the fur texture. I glazed to bring the whole foot lighter. And I decided to go lighter instead of darker with the feet, both because my concept animal photo was lighter paws, and also because however I base her feet are probably going to be on, surrounded by darker stuff, whether it's dirt or, whatever I decide to put her in. So I decided the light feet might stand out better. So we'll see. I think you can do it quite easily. I mean, it'll work. You'll end up making a lot of it black, depending. I mean, I guess it depends too on what because there's so many different styles. Like comic book style is comic book style, and yet there are so many styles within that. There are so many ways to tackle it. I have a book on comic inking that breaks it down. Essentially, has a bunch of different artists ink the same panel later in the book, and it's very instructive. Like you get a very different feel. Depending on your inking style. I think comic book style is something that'll be fascinating to see get popular in miniature painting, because I think that what we'll find is that there's a whole gamut of effects that you can do, and that even as every artist has a style, they will also have a different style in comic book. So you'll be able to tell one person's comic book style from another person's comic book style. That's what I'm betting. Oh, chibis are super simple. Yeah. Pin lining? Like just the real thin lining, you mean, Rise? I have no fear of any fine detail lining. I have a traditional art background and I love micro detail. So I'm pretty sure that however I need to do it, I can do it. It's tricky more because it's a three-dimensional object you're trying to do comic book. That's where the trickiness is for me, is the same thing with the NMM, where you need to make it look right from different angles, and that's going to be interesting. We may find as time goes on that the best examples of comic book style and miniature painting are in dioramas with a fixed visual point, where you're meant to look at it from get one certain direction and that's it. But yeah. I'm kind of excited to do this precisely because I have such good brush control. because I feel like I could lay down that real thin lining very consistently. I think it's another reason to build your brush control if you're going to try to do. I think it's probably more applicable though, like on busts, like looking at comic book painted busts. Like you have all that room. You could get so fine with it. I get excited when I think about that. Use ink, yeah. I would be using probably MSP liners or walnut brown or black, solid black. I do have inks, and I have both water soluble and not water soluble. I do have traditional lining inks, but I don't know about that on miniatures. I guess the permanent inks would be fine. Did a light glaze again. I'll probably have to do another one to get the toes to be lighter like that. See how these are still very dark? So what we're going to do is we're going to glaze again here and bring it up. Yeah, my problem with ink is I'd have to add matting agents because sometimes it can be a little glossy, and I don't want that glossiness. I have a rogue hair on my brush, guys. Hold on. Let me see if I can get this thing to... Oh, maybe it just was a temporary... My rogue hair has disappeared. Not this rogue hair. But adding matting agent... Yeah, or you could just, I mean, the way I'm just going to deal with it is by cheating. Cheating and adding anti-shine additive from Reaper. Because, frankly, these days, acrylic inks, they're just washes. So you can add in stuff from regular paint companies. And this is the stuff this is essentially a matting additive. So it's not a matting medium. It's actually almost all matting agent. It's very, very strong. So you just use a little bit, but you can take any ink and make it matte. Or paint, for that matter. There's a reason I put that stuff in a bottle, because it's so darn useful, because I'm so used to traditional art supplies, which, as you just noted, think that matte is satin. So hard. So hard to deal with. So we've got a little bit of a fade between the toes here. See how it took a while for that glaze to take, and when it finally dried out, then we got more of a fade on that foot. But that foot is also underneath her, so we don't necessarily want to bring it up quite as much as the other foot. Yeah, you may have to thin pure black quite a bit. But technically, and that's another actually excellent point and another fascinating thing about comic book style, right? You could decide not to go pure black with it. As an artist, you could decide, I'm going to go rogue shadow with all my lining, or I'm going to go blue liner with all my lining. Essentially use a different color liner paint and use that way and still do comic book style, but it would have a different feel to it because your shadows wouldn't be true black. They'd be different. So yeah, it would be fascinating stuff. I look forward to seeing it develop. There we go. So I'm mostly highlighting the outer toes. I'm going to highlight up the side of the leg here because the leg is kind of going out to the side and back. And so there's a big shadow. You can see the shadow that the knee drops right there. But we still want some highlight up here. So, but yeah, that's where color choices can change a style, like can really define a style, is you take something and you use something slightly different that essentially fulfills the purpose, but it's just a little different. But that's the fun of art. That's the fun of like doing all this stuff. It's just trying out stuff. Nothing is right, nothing is wrong. All that matters at the end of the day is, are you happy with it? Does it look cool? Then you're good. I'm just going to dab a little bit of lighter color between the toes there, just again to kind of bring out and de-emphasize those big. Her toes are more compressed here and they're more spread here, and there's more weight. She's like leaning on that leg, so they're more splayed out. So I'm going to keep it that way. But that's looking okay. And I want to bring up the paw, the hands just a little bit here. Now we may find that the legs, yeah, no, I think that's good. That lightens up the toes, but it's not actually too distracting. The risk down here with making these light is that you're pulling the eye. But it is working because so much contrast is up here on her face, because we added those markings that were on the actual hair photo. And that added essentially freehand. So we've got these stripes on either side of her muzzle, you've got the markings above her eyes, and you've got the black tips on her ears. All of this essentially functions like freehand in that it is very tight, light, and dark detail. And that lets us get away with these lighter feet, and the lighter feet won't immediately pull your attention because of this. And when we add that violet red shirt, then that's going to help as well. It's going to be warm, color that's up here, and it should pull the eye away, especially if I go dark with the pants, which I'm thinking I'm going to do. Bye, Velendar. Good luck with your NMMs. All right, so I'm going to highlight the paws, and then we'll move on to the shirt. Need to get a little bit more on the hands, just to bring them up a little bit more. Got a little bit too much of this in frame. There we go. Now let's get closer. And sometimes your lights will show up really, really starkly, so you bring in your previous coat and just kind of brush a little bit over the top to knock them down just a little. And if it really goes up too far, you can glaze with your kind of mid-shadow to knock it down just a tad. Indeed, it is morning here. Out in my westy coastness. Alrighty, that's about where I want things right now. So I think I'll add one more highlight out here. Just a little bit there. And then we'll be good there. All right. Yes, that looks good. A little bit more highlight here on the arm. I want to make sure that everything is reading correctly on those upper surfaces. There. And technically I do need to get the entire backside, but I want to get some red on her also. So we'll move back and forth. We'll at least block in her red shirt. I'm going to use violet red. I'm going to add probably 1 drop of white to it, because it's very saturated out the gate, and I think it's a little too bright for her, because she has a very muted, see how bright that looks? It doesn't look very good, does it? So that's your first clue. Remember the rule, if you're going to have one muted color on a model, you have to mute them all. And I think, do I want to mute with green? Maybe I do. Maybe I want to play around. Where's my Viper? Naga green, that'll work. Oh, bye, Kerniko. Can't trust everything you hear. All right, so let's try to mute this with adding some green. The reason I'm going with a yellowy green is because it's got violet in it. So violet red, let's move Bunny out of the way here. Let's get our big black base. And I gotta use my pokey tool because I haven't used my Naga green in a while. You go in these like kind of rotations, and Naga green used to be one I grabbed all the time, and I haven't used it for a while. We just haven't been painting green things on here. Obviously, I need to like paint some more green things on this stream. Somebody coming up is going to be green. That's what I'm saying. All right, I need a mixing brush. Yeah, focus is off just because I had the focus on Bunny. And you don't really need the focus to see the color, but. And now the focus will be off when I actually do the drop. Let's see, here's the problem. Tiny drop of green. Let's try it. That darkened it a little bit. I'm going to add a drop of white. Remember the rule. If you're not sure what something really is, add a drop of white to it. Or in this case, just a touch of it. There we go. I'm looking for, this is kind of a pretty color. I'm specifically looking at it next to my other colors. I'm trying to essentially make it look good next to these other colors. So I want, sure, Polly. Yeah, greens are a good way to mute out reds. I need to mute it just a little bit more though. And I'm going with a fairly light green too, for a reason. I don't want to darken this too much. No, that's getting close, I think. It'll probably be what I probably need or will end up doing. And I don't have, oh no, I don't have my sticks purple here. Curses. Well, I'll have to use something else. What other dark purples do I have? I have Monarch. I haven't used Monarch for a while. I have Imperial. Let's use Imperial. It's a little bit muted. Oh, I also have Bruise. Actually, let me get, and I think I actually put them away, but I need to find my Bones Kickstarter purples. Hold on. Into the secret closet. Looking for the box. Aha. Let's grab a couple of these. Yeah, let's grab those. That sounds great. We'll just leave our door open. All right, so we've got two purples that we can play with here. And I'm kind of going for Orchid. I was thinking about Bruised, and Bruised definitely will take it closer to being in line with the purples here, because it's a very muted purple. And I want to shade my reds with purples, because that's what I like to do. Weather forecasting is a science, though, isn't it? Like, been some serious, somebody, I was just listening to an audiobook that analyzed and talked about the science behind meteorology. And it's pretty fascinating stuff. It's mostly patterns. Very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to drop some water into this. as I've been creating it. My end looks pretty good currently. So I'm going to take a big blob of this, put it over there. And I think, you know what? I think orchid would be good. Let's use orchid. I like orchids. Orchid purple is pretty beautiful purple, if I dare say so. Even if it isn't the original orchid purple. Reaper changed it. Apparently they felt it was too close to something else. I'm not sure why they changed it. But who knows? Maybe they just didn't like the original color I had. Whatever the case, it is now this color. Well, plus I add a little bit more red. So I think that'll work pretty well. I'm gonna try it. One way we could work this, if we really wanted it to work, is we could start with a muted purple, like bruised, and we could highlight it with this. That would definitely make it work. I'm not sure that that is going to work with this, but... Because just as this is too muted, but I think maybe just a little bit more green. I'm following my gut here. You got to follow your gut on this one. And your gut, the more you mix, the better your gut will get. A little bit more green, muting it out. Now I feel like it's much better. I'm just pretty much listening to my gut. I'm looking at these going, okay. And they're closer on the color wheel, right? Because you've got a yellow, orange, and you've got a red. So that's part of why we're going purple with the shadows, to push it away, push it apart. I'm just mixing like crazy. Let's just go for it. Where is my basilisk green? We're going to go a little crazy here. Sorry, guys. Every once in a while, ants go crazy on stream. It's a documented fact. They just start mixing weird colors into other colors. Not giving you the recipe that you want because you just want it to stay simple, but Anne doesn't want it to stay simple today. There we go. All right, I like that. So because, and this is one of those weird color interactions. So you've got violet in the violet red. So in other words, you have magenta. Then you've got phthalo green in basilisk green. And they mix together, they make blue, which is why this dark purple is now shifting toward blue. Yes, red and green make blue. It's fact. Alrighty. I'm going to start with this medium color. I'm going to shade it down. I'm just going to do one arm of the shirt and judge whether I like it. Let's get this out of the way. I did add a little bit of white to this, remember, to bring the color out, to get a feel for what it was. And I'm banking on liking this once I put the shadow on. Because every time you change something on a model, it's going to, or apply a shadow or highlight to a color, it's going to change the color. It's not too bad. It's not terrible. It's not great because it's too close on the color wheel. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, I'm going to go for this. I feel like I can make it work. So let's block it in. It's not acting like great. Like it doesn't love the hair. It's not like a color that makes you go, wow, nice harmony. No, it's definitely fighting a bit. But this will be instructive as we change it. So we will work with it. And there are times when you try a color on a mini and you're just like, no way. And you're right. Your gut says no way, and your gut is right, and you should listen to it. Actually, the starting color is violet red. I muted it out with Naga, and then I used for a shadow orchid purple, muted out with basilisk. So essentially you see a pattern here. We've got two mid-grade red and green and a darker red and green. And I'm doing this on purpose because I didn't want this mid-tone to get too dark, and I wanted this not to be light. So, and there's a little bit of my initial mix of these in the shadow because I always mix a bit of my mid-tone into my shadow and vice versa usually. So violet red is what you guys voted for. So you stuck us here. You totally stuck us in this boat. Now we have to make this work. Definitely not an intuitive color. Intuitive colors would have been more purple because she has kind of golden fur. Blue would have been a great fix with her, and I'm probably still going to go dark blue with the pants. I haven't decided on corset color yet, though, so I may go dark blue with the corset and go different with the pants. I'm not sure. Haven't decided. Make sure and get that part in there. Yeah, it's one of my faves though. Like it really, well, I used it to make mixed pinks all the time in Aura. Because I like having that little hint of purpley color in the pink. It makes it a much more complex pink. That's it. I used it for the Halfling Assassin. The 75mm one I did. Which I still need to get some good pictures of. It's been on my to-do list for a while now, but we haven't set up we need to set up an area for photoing our minis, and we just have not. I need to order some lights for it. Have not gotten around to it. Just getting a solid coat. I was thinking about taking the corset black, actually, and going dark blue with the pants. And the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking I like that idea. Could do yellow with some of the detailing, or gold. All right, I need to let that dry, so while I do it... we forgot to refocus. See, this is why I didn't want to refocus on the palette, because then the character gets out of focus. I always use these... the L lights that we use for ReaperCon when I'm doing mini photography, because I can adjust the color and intensity when I do a lighting setup. Also, it needs diffusers. I always throw some white satin in front of it if I can find my white satin these days. You want your light to be like like to be there, but to be diffused, to not be strong and making hot spots, bright lights. So I just use these L's, and I love these bar lights, actually. That's an L-shaped LED light from Tautronics, because that bar works great across the top of the photo pad. And then I can put one on its side in front and put like wrap satin or white cloth around it to diffuse the light, and then you get your lower flood. You need light ideally coming from both directions, up top, in front of the model, and then down below. I actually did a PDF on this. Oh, sorry. Must kill bug. There. It's warming up, so bugs are like coming at us these days. Yeah, you always want to diffuse the lights, but I like these because I can control the intensity too, so I can ratchet it up or down. I did a PDF on this for my coaching tier, but because my coaching tier is kind of like being kind of scaling back, maybe I'll put that out for general consumption on my Patreon, which I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/paintingbig. And there is a ton of content on it on all sorts of levels of mini painting and all sorts of subjects. And I'm very good at keywords, so you can usually find things if you need to find things. But yes, thank you to everybody on this stream who supports me on there. It enables me to do this stream and to generally be an actual artist for a living instead of having to go back to a real job, for which you have my eternal gratitude. And of course, it enables me to do this stream in the morning since I don't have to go to a real job. Quote unquote. I'm glad you like the Patreon. Thank you, lady. But yeah, 3 years. It's been going over 3 years, and so there is a ton of content because I do at least 4 pieces of content every month. So there's a gigantic backlog, and we're still finding stuff to talk about, so... There we go. So nice solid base on the pink. It's not bad. Could get better. We'll make it better. This is just the base coat, and it is going to change as we progress. This stream is a real job, quote unquote. Yes. Yeah, from time to time we've had people do classes on miniatures photography at ReaperCon, and then I think there's one, Dev is going to do one at KublaCon out here at on the West Coast. But if you ever get a chance to take one, it's always instructive. I'm going to do a little bit of lining here around the pink before we tackle it, and as far as the shadows. The color tier is like, if you use MSP, Reaper MSP, or want to use it, it is, it's all about MSP, baby. But it is a lot about just colors, too. I mean, and how they play together. And what kind of things you can use to shade and highlight them. I probably need to do a few more color theory, like just pure color theory ones. I like to do the hands-on stuff like I just did with the Copper and MM Triad. That was the $5 tier this month. But every once in a while, I should probably throw a pure theory in there. Yeah, probably the best thing I can say about taking classes in any venue is to not overtax yourself, lady. Like, a lot of people come to ReaperCon and they take 8 classes, and by the time they get to class number 5, they are completely fried. They are not capable of absorbing or learning any longer. And like, they just don't get the value out of the classes that they sign up for. There's this mistaken idea that to quote unquote get your value, you have to take a bunch of classes. And it's like, there is definitely a point where you get diminishing returns there. It's always wiser to take a single class a day and then spend a portion of the rest of that day practicing the stuff that you learned in class. You will get so much more out of a con just taking 4 classes, one a day, or 3 classes, one a day if it's a shorter con, and practicing what you learn, than you will try and take 6 or 8 classes during the course of a con. I cannot emphasize this enough. And it's a shame, too, because you take all those classes and then you don't get really any benefit out of them, but you've kept other people who could have used those classes from taking them. So always consider, like, that kind of thing. It's real, especially when you're learning brand new stuff and there are techniques you have to, like, internalize and think about. It can be rough. So that's a natural part of the learning process. Your eye gets better than your hand. Or your ability, your ability to realize that your work is not as good as it could be, exceeds your ability to fix it. And this is something that happens in all creative pursuits and probably in all things that you learn, period. It's a definite thing. It takes a long time to get to unconscious competence where you can just like execute and fix things. And even then, sometimes when I'm working on a piece, and you guys see me do it, I'll be like, okay, how do I fix this? And I'll have to stop and think about it. Or how do I get this effect? Or we haven't done this before, So what I'm doing now is applying shadows anywhere where it makes sense, which is in the creases, as you can see them. Also underneath this elbow. The light would not fall on the underside of the surface. In fact, you can see the shadow being cast by the light before I even paint it in. Yeah, the other advice that I could give you about taking classes, Lady Kachara, is take to heart if they tell you what level the class is. Like, really assess your own level and where you are in your painting journey. And there are going to be some techniques where you're going to benefit more if you understand like some core techniques before. I call these there are mechanical techniques and there are conceptual techniques. And mechanical techniques are stuff like layering and glazing and lining. And conceptual techniques are things like source lighting and NMM. Stuff like that. Dramatic lighting effects, things like that. And the conceptual techniques usually benefit from a knowledge of core technical techniques. So if you feel like you really don't quite grok layering yet, maybe take classes on highlighting and shading, but don't take classes on NMM. Or if you don't understand light direction, don't take an OSL class. Things like that. Pay attention if something says it's an advanced class. Or that you should be at a certain level before taking it. I see many frustrated people, and we have given refunds before at ReaperCon. For people not understanding or not reading that, a class was more advanced than their current ability. And so they didn't even have like the basic ability to execute on the concept. And so it just wasn't useful for them to take the class, and they were sad. All right, so we've got some of our shadows mocked in, and now this is harmonizing a little better with our bunny, and the reason is that our bunny has a lot of golden color on her, and I've now put purple shadows in. So those are complementary colors, and if I really go heavy purple with these shadows, it'll harmonize even better. But right now it's not fighting anymore, so. Yeah, don't be that person. All right, so I'm gonna actually, there's a little bit of detailing here around her décolletage. So but is it a cave troll? There's just a little bit of shading there. I do want just a little bit more. I'm going to grab my orchid purple just straight up without adding any of my violet red. And I'm going to mix a color with a tiny bit with basilisk green. I just want a darker purple at this point to almost use as a liner. If I have to, I'll add some walnut, but I'm going to see if I can just do it by darkening it with basilisk. I have seen people take the wrong classes at ReaperCon just because they were desperate to get into a class, any class, and so they took an advanced class, but they're like a beginner. And it's not ideal for, you know, either the students or the teacher, because then the teacher is like, oh no's, and we feel so bad when it happens. And we're inclined to like kind of step back and help them with the early techniques. You know, I don't know a single good teacher that wouldn't want to help. But at the same time, that takes away from the class from everybody else who paid for, you know, the advanced class. So, and chances are the person who took it kind of mistakenly is still not going to be happy because they're still not going to get the real value out of the class. So it's just a sad thing. So here's the very, very dark purple that we get when we mix basilisk and orchid. I'm going to try to use that for some really dark shadows here. No, I did not refocus the camera because I don't want to refocus it 15 times. Oh, yeah. That's sad. Sorry, Inara. Yeah, that's not the best tactic, Turgeon. Because the teacher will try to get you up to speed, and that means 10 or 15 minutes that the rest of the class loses out on because you have to be brought up to speed, because we feel bad that you aren't at the level that you need to be to get the content. So I mean, for me, I feel a horrible like urge to like go and kind of like, you know, really try to step you up fast, at least with some of the concepts. But that when you've got a 12-person class, that's really not ideal. So really aim for classes that are going to be of the most value to you. Otherwise, like, because as an instructor, it would be like you being like basic math, like being like, you know, grade school math and taking advanced algebra. There is no survey course about that. You just don't have the foundation to even try, right? And you can get there, like you can kind of like run into that with mini painting sometimes. There's a lot of foundational techniques that all work together to give you the toolbox to the point where you can get your brain thinking, you know, and executing a certain way. No, Pendrake, I'm going to go blue. I think I'm going to go blue with the trousers. It's shadows for that. It's a very dark shadow color for the shirt. Yeah, breadth of experience actually doesn't work very well when you're learning mini painting. It's a far more value to assess where you are and to take a class that builds on your current knowledge level. I mean, you could even draw comparisons like, say, quilting, like, or embroidery or any other like craft or art. You know, if you don't have like the basic idea of stitching, how can you do super advanced stitching? Like it's beyond even like you understanding how to even get there. So no, it's hands-on a lot, Turgeon. We used to do demo. There used to be a lot more demo classes, but people resoundingly wanted hands-on. So now we teach hands-on. Now you can come and sit through a class. And there are some classes, like color and light theory classes, tend to be talking classes, tend to be survey classes. Yeah, if you want, like, I mean, this is, if you want to sit and watch a demo, then like Patreons and stuff and the online cons are a great way to do it. I think the best way to do it. We do have like cameras and monitors at ReaperCon, but yeah, people really wanted hands-on because you're going to learn more. So we went that way. I'm just using this kind of really dark purple color to kind of throw in some extra shadows. And there's little like kind of poofs, like you can see how it's kind of bunching up there at her shirt line. So I'm kind of putting that in as well, and I'm bringing out the top of this little hemline. There's detail there. No, not at all. Not at all, yeah. It's easy to get the idea if you just came in, right, Turgeon? Because we haven't had, like, we did have a live ReaperCon last year, but if you're just watching the classes that are specifically geared for online, I mean, but they are specifically geared for online. Like, so it's structured that way. But in-person classes at ReaperCon are very much in-person, like, hands-on. Yeah, thanks, Inara. Aw, I just got blushes. If you want demos, streamers like me who stop and kind of explain what we're doing, especially, you know, and answer questions, we are the best demo you're going to get. Because here, we're set up in, you know, I've got my little studio. It's set up to give you good picture quality. I'm here. I'm used to tuning into chat to answer questions. You know, you are the only, like, if you're the only one asking questions, you are essentially the only student. So you get a lot of one-on-one time in this class while everybody else is making bunny jokes. But yeah, you would never get that. Like, this is a unique teaching. Twitch is a unique teaching experience and a unique learning experience. If you have someone like me who is very focused on instruction and on explanation and on the why. Yeah, there are some theory classes. There's some very good, like, color and light classes. Bye, crows. Sorry I missed that. Did you search lining? Because I know I've used lining as a key. In fact, probably the first one is build brush control faster. So if you look at brush control, you'll find that, and that is actually mostly about lining. Bull. But I know I've used lining as a keyword. It may be one of the pinned topics up top. If you go to the front page of the Patreon, you should be able to search for keywords, search for lining. Like, it's the first page after you type in patreon.com/paintingbig, and it takes you to that first page. There should be a search bar there. And you could search by keyword. Just search lining. And definitely search for that build brush control faster video. So if you search for brush control, you should get it. That also covers lining and also just a lot of great breakdown of how to work your brush control faster. There we go. Yeah. That's true. That's a good one too, right, Anar? Because it just lays out all of the ideas behind it, and you don't have to do any hands-on. Yeah, I always liked those classes because then I could take copious notes and really kind of digest it and then try stuff. Yeah, I do cover the liner colors also in tier 2, I think, at one point. All right, so I've put in some darker shadows here. You can see them painted in because I want more contrast. A little bit of a shadow here underneath her corset. So so that you can really see those shadows now in the shirt, and I like that. So that's coming out. And the backside also, this arm sticks out and it's going to catch the light, so you aren't going to have nearly as dark shadows as you're going to have over here on this side where I blocked in a lot of darker color. You can do a lot of blocking with shadow color where you don't have to worry about blending it much. If you've already thinned your paint with shading, which you definitely should, many shadows are somewhat transparent, and when you thin them, layering or blending becomes super easy. So it's definitely a reason to thin your shadow paints. It's because you just really can make it super simple for yourself then. Just a little bit. Now I'm not adding such dark shadows on top of the arm because, like I said, it's out in the light. So I'm adding my previous shadow color, this guy, not the really dark purple. Thank you, Rex. I try to be really focused on explanation and giving you guys not just the you should do this, but the why you should do this. All right, I think I'm going to grab this color and see what I can do with the highlights. Now, when you are mixing up a complex color like this violet red, which has a lot of green and stuff in it, if I'm adding highlights up, I'm probably going to go with pure white because I don't want any other color to mess with it. So if I add an off-white, I'm probably adding in some yellow or some gray or some whatever. I don't want to necessarily do that. So I'm going to try to mix a highlight color. And I'm not mixing a huge puddle of it. And the reason I'm not mixing a huge puddle of it is I only need a tiny bit. So I'm just going real lightweight with it. I don't need to make a lot. And I need to thin it quite a bit because we have white in it. But yeah, I actually don't subscribe to any other advanced Patreons, mostly because I just don't have time to watch the content. So I can't give you an idea of like other Patreons that may be also useful. I mean, if you like airbrushing, I do recommend taking a class from Aaron Lovejoy of Miniature Monthly. He does private, he does online airbrushing classes. I think he used to do in person, so maybe he'll come back and do that as well as things open up. But Aaron is a great teacher for airbrush. Just going to take a little bit of highlight and just pick this up. I don't want to lose a lot of this color, this violet red color. So we've got to be careful how much highlight we put on. You can see how I've highlighted the side there. If we put a lot of highlight on, then if we put too much on, it's going to shift the color of the top toward pink. See how that shifted it? That looks much lighter now than this. It's because there's so little room up here that we've lost our mid-tone. So the first thing I'm going to do is to reaffirm my shadows, and then I'm going to glaze with my mid-tone and drop these highlights down a little bit. I want to bring my shadow in pretty dark. And then I'm going to glaze a bit and see what I can do. No bad, Zeke. That's a good one. When I was little, we had a neighbor who was really, they were very, very religious, but it was their own specific brand. And I don't remember what religion they were. But one day when the Jehovah's Witness came around, she not only sicked the dogs on them, she grabbed her hose and hosed them off her property. It made quite an impression on me as a very small child. I remember it to this day. Oh yeah, let's not do that. Thanks, Quindy. Sorry, sometimes I get on like and stream like Zen, and I'm just like, oh yeah, talk topic. But yes, let's not. There we go. So I'm adding in some of those highlights on the end. And again, we're going toward pink. See how when you add highlights, it changes. So the answer to that is always to glaze with your midtone. Make sure that you haven't taken over too much of the real estate with your highlight. When you're painting these little guys, it's really easy to do that. It's really easy to put too much highlight on because you're thinking highlights. I'm supposed to highlight things. But then everything turns like a different color and you're just like, whoa, what happened? It's like when your red cape turns orange. Now, one way you can get away from this with red is kind of a sneaky way. And that is to highlight with pure white, thinned down really, really much, and then to glaze with your midtone. Thus, you do not even use pink as a highlight. You use white, and you glaze over it with your mid. And this can be a sneaky tactic for highlighting red with white without going pink, because it doesn't quite read the same way. So I'd say white about 2-to-1. Yeah. I find that the oxides are better highlighted with something with yellow in it. Yep, exactly, Nomad Zeke, right? I don't think so. I think the hardest to balance is black, pure black and pure white Turgeon. The big thing with red is to remind yourself that, half of your area needs to be taken up with red and not pink, not purple, not, any other element. The challenge I think that people run into is just forgetting or not understanding that your highlights don't have to be very big. They can be tiny. Depending on the shininess. Now, as you get more advanced, you'll learn that you should vary the size of your highlights based on the actual luster of the surface you're trying to depict. So if you're trying to depict a shiny surface, then tiny highlights are kind of the order of the day. But there's also like cheatiness when you're painting 28s like this because you're working on such small areas. So then sometimes you're just going to cheat a little and pop those highlights, not because the surface is shiny, but because you need your highlights to actually show up. Ta-da. Let's see how that works. There we go. So what happens here is that you're taking your midtone and you're putting it over the white, and you still get the benefits of the highlight, but because you're not directly painting pink on the model and because the last color you applied was your midtone, it tends to trick the eye and look more like it stayed violet red. Oh yeah, I mean, I understand the shift from quart to gallon, and vice versa. We used to mix all of our formulas in a quart and then multiply by 4 up to the gallon, and right away I figured out that was just kind of evil. So then when the paint department was kind of mine to do with as I would, I started just mixing colors as a gallon formula and not as a quart, because it was less fraught with peril. So let's take that and let's do that here too. Let's take our white and add in some highlights just with the white. And notice how thin the white is. I mean, it is quite thin. And I can do this to also accentuate the little details at the cuff here. Little cuff details, a little bit like that. All right, now let's take our mid-tone and apply it. And my mid-tone's quite thinned down now. It's kind of like a heavy wash. We'll apply our mid-tone over the top of that white. And we will still get highlights, but we will get much more definition. And we won't go pink. You can kind of see those little bits coming out right there like they should. So that's an example of how you can use underpainting highlights and avoid the pinkness issue. And because you are putting a heavy wash over it, which is essentially a what do you call it? Contrast paint. You're essentially applying a contrast paint over the top of this because you're using a heavy wash. So because of that, it blends everything in. If I need to pull extra off, I will. People voted, Enrieth, on what they wanted last time, and they said violet red is what they wanted the blouse to be. So violet red is a Reaper color, but it's very bright, and her fur is very muted. And so I wanted to mute it, and one of the ways you can mute a color is by adding its complement. So I chose a medium light green with a little bit of yellow in it because there's purple in this violet red. And I mixed these two together to soften the violet red down so that it wasn't as bright, and so it would work better with her fur color. And then when I went to mix a shadow, I chose kind of a muted, more dark purple, orchid purple from the Kickstarter colors, and I chose a different green to mix with that, a much darker green, so that we would go colder and create almost like a black plum kind of color to shade with. Everybody seems to be jumping on that bandwagon, and my answer is the same as, actually, I think we talked about this with like color shift paints, but I always think it's inadvisable to do that sort of thing, Eric, unless you can do it better, cheaper, or provide it to a market that otherwise can't. Like if you have better distribution in a market than the competitor does. Reaper has excellent distribution, but there are lots of other companies now that are doing contrast paints. So unless Reaper could do it better or cheaper, I feel like it's just not really like a good niche. Like it's always, chasing the market is always not ideal. I think, you always want to be the person forging new, paths, and Reaper's very good at that. Yeah. Thanks, Enrieth. Yeah, I'm trying to do a little bit more advanced color theory on this stream lately, as far as using complements to soften colors and things like that, just to get people thinking in that direction. A little bit more color mixing. And we need to bring out little details here and like underpainting and stuff like that. But yeah, red, violet plus white just generally makes a pretty soft berry pink. And if you add purple, it goes very raspberry. It's very nice. So it's a color that I use. I add white to it a lot. Like I find it a bit vibrant straight out the bottle, and I use a lot of muted colors. But I do like to play with it and utilize it to get those beautiful raspberry colors. Alrighty. I think we've managed to do quite a bit today, guys. Like, we didn't quite get to highlighting some of the back here. The back of the legs need a little bit of highlighting around the hocks, and the tail needs some highlights, and the ears need a little bit more. You can see the soft fur texture on those. But otherwise, like, we got our sleeves done, and I'm pretty happy with the color. I think it's going to work. And we didn't get to her eyes today, so we'll have to do that. Now that I kind of know what colors I'm going for, we'll have to choose a good eye color for her. So anybody have some last questions? We've got just like a minute or two left in the stream. I'm probably going to go black leather with the top, because I think if we put gold catches, like a gold belt and stuff, I think that will work really well. And I'm probably going dark blue with the pants. Blue was one of the colors that I asked if people wanted to use for this model. And it had, like, blue-gray had a pretty strong following after the violet-red. So I probably will do like a dark blue-gray for the pants. Probably black leather for the top. I haven't figured out some of the accents yet. Might even use like a brighter blue for some of the accents, like the laces on the front here and these little flaps, which are usually leather, but it would be kind of cool to put them in like a brighter blue leather next to the black top and then the dark blue pants. I'm kind of thinking that. Those are the colors I'm thinking of. I might finish up the fur. I might do eyes. I might decide to block in the crossbow, because the crossbow is boring. I try to do the boring parts of the model first. That way, all you have left is fun. Inara, that was rich leather, blonde hair, blonde fur, and black and brown mixes. There, 130, 137, 429, and 257. To give her that kind of like golden blonde. And I based it on a picture of a hare online. And the facial markings are based on that photo as well. Whenever you are working on an animal or a animal-esque thing that resembles something from nature, look at photos. It gives you ideas. I mean, you could make Nightmare Purple work, but then, I don't know. I reach strongly for neutrals, Merilith, and because I've already got kind of this golden color going on along with the raspberry, and I'm planning on going dark blue, I limit the number of colors I put on a figure as far as like more intensive colors. I could make Nightshade Purple work just because I'd keep it like pretty much as the black on the piece, and it would probably work out that way. But then if I wanted to put black somewhere else, then it would make that look purple. Then I'd have a purple, blue, red, yellow, I don't know. I tend to limit my color schemes. I use accent colors, but I don't know that I would go that way here. You could, and you'd probably be fine because Nightshade Purple is so black. So yes, it would work. No, I probably won't go there. I probably will stick in the, I'll use my neutrals. I like to use neutrals, so. Yeah, I don't know. Like, if you look at my stuff, the most colors we've used on a figure would be this dude recently. And he's got a lot of colors if you count the gold NMM. And you still have to remember, I'm going to put some gold NMM on her, so that's going to introduce yellow. So we've got, with him, he's largely a red, blue, teal color scheme. And the orange is the accent color. But she doesn't have a lot of accents on her. Like, she's really just got kind of a little bit of jewelry and things, and she doesn't have all the stuff that he does. But even with him, notice I'm leaning heavily on black, brown, bone. There's more black and brown, more brown. I'm leaning heavily on those things because, and there's black there, because there's otherwise so many colors. So I really feel that if you're going to do a lot of different colors on a mini, you do need the neutrals to come out as well. And then you come down to something like Ogre, where we're keeping it very limited palette. And, you know, working, and other colors are like more like I used orange for the rust, but it's just for the rust, you know, things like that. And otherwise he's a very much a red, red, orange, yellow, actually, with just a little bit of that blue hint, blue-gray, just for kind of a pop of complementary feel. But I don't like to get too over colorful on the models. I like a lot of neutrals. And that's just something that's been part of my painting style from very early on. I tend to like one or two strong colors on a mini. And after that, everything is either a small accent or it's de-emphasized. And this is like, really, it is a personal style thing. So it isn't something that like you yourself have to adhere to. You could totally go with Nightshade Purple and it would still work. It would just be a different style. So I feel like often though the neutrals will ground a piece, especially dark browns. They'll tend to like give a piece like a more earthy feel. It'll kind of ground the piece in reality. I don't know. Dark browns really make a piece. They harmonize with every other color. So I utilize them a lot because they do. And then black tends to be kind of just there. But considering we've got this red and so much attention on her paws and like her markings on her face, I think going dark with the corset is a good idea just because it pulls attention more up here. And like I said, yeah, could go purple. But then I'd have that. The thing is with Nightshade, if you're going to highlight it, you're going to highlight it with white, which is going to give you a really washed out purple gray. And I'm not sure how that would interact at this point with the berry colored tunic. And if you brought it up with brighter purples, then it definitely becomes its own color. It's no longer a neutral. And then Imperial Purple is very, very close to this berry top again. So then you've got colors that are very close on the color wheel and you're risking the fight. So yeah. All right, it's 10 after, so even though I was a little late today, I think that is an adequate time to go to. I hope you all had fun today. Tomorrow is Ogre Day, and also me announcing what the model's that's gonna replace Ogre is gonna be. Yeah, today is social media day, where Anne wrestles with her mailing lists and WordPress. So there we go, guys. This is what we're doing. This is what we've done. Yeah, Kibo Akami, thank you. Thank you for coming and showing up. Yeah, no problem. And it all goes to VOD too, Merilith, and it all goes to YouTube after. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic day, and we will see you again tomorrow morning, all right? Woo! And there's the button. Have a good one, guys. Bye.